All right, so I just want to, in this topic, break down some of the creative thinking tools that are available to us. The most common ones, there's lots out there, but the most common ones that can help us sometimes when we're sharing ideas or working through problems that can help us come from different perspectives. And the main tools I want to look at are brainstorming, affinity diagrams, the Bono six hats of thinking, which is an example of parallel thinking. I want to have a look at mind mapping, and then provocation and challenge, which will be embedded with many of these. Okay, so let's kick off by talking about brainstorming or random entry, which is really about coming in from different perspectives. And when we're talking about brainstorming, the act of brainstorming simply is getting a group together and getting that group to come up with as many ideas as possible from different perspectives. So often we will say, okay, team, we've got this problem. We want to come up with a solution. We want to brainstorm the solution. So what I'd like you to do is just throw up some ideas and we're going to capture them and work through them. And you might be uh, on the whiteboard or on a big piece of butcher's paper or flip chart capturing these ideas. So when we think about brainstorming, the act of thinking is very specific. So what we're asking for people to do when we say we want you to throw up some ideas and we're going to see what hits the wall and what sticks, we're asking people to do divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is where we come from a central point and we try and break off into we try and think outwards in as many different directions as possible. So it's really about generating different ideas in as many different directions as possible, trying to look at it from different perspectives. So often, we think about it. We will often try and say something like, "Oh, we want you to think outside the box," or "come at this from a different angle," or something like that. And sometimes, random entry is where we might say, "Okay, I'm just gonna pick a random point. Let's think of this problem from this particular point, and let's see where that leads us." So not necessarily, too much logical thinking, but more just creation of random ideas to see what we can create, what other patterns of ideas we can create from that. So divergent thinking often requires open-ended questions. So, what are some ideas? Give me some ideas, or what are some suggestions around this problem, or what are some of the things that customers have been telling you about this, and so forth. And of course, it requires a respect for diversity, because one of the things that's going to happen is that you're going to get very different ideas, and some of those will seem really ridiculous. And one of the pitfalls of brainstorming is that sometimes people get too judgmental when we're trying to be creative. So there are two things that we want to do here. And I'll talk about the second one more in depth shortly. But the very first thing that we want to do is we want to be as random in our thinking as possible. And if we fall into the trap of being critical or judgy on those ideas as we're being random, it stops and stifles the random process. So people then start to self-censor before they put out ideas because they think, oh, Tony's going to make fun of this one, or someone's going to laugh, or it's whatever the case may be. So the first part of brainstorming is really about being as random with our ideas to try and get a different perspective, this outside the box concept. So there has to be a respect for diversity, and there has to be a judgment-free climate around the act of divergent thinking when brainstorming. So get the group together. Okay, for the next 10 minutes, I want everyone to come up with as many crazy ideas on how we can, or what we can do around this as possible. And I don't want anybody to criticize or assess or make judgment calls on any of these. We'll do that after we do the 10 minutes of brainstorming. So for 10 minutes, people are just going to go really wild in terms of suggestions, and we're going to write them down. And depending on the dynamic of the group, sometimes you might say to people, okay, just randomly throw stuff out. And other times you might be worried that certain strong personalities will take over. So you might say, I'm going to go around and everybody will have a turn each. So we're going to go around the room 5 times. So we'll go around once, everyone gives one, and then we'll go around twice, and everyone gives one, and so forth till we exhaust it. Or you might say, everyone's got 5 post-it notes. I want you to write down 5 ideas, or on your notes, write down 5 ideas, and then, you know, you write them up on the wall, on the whiteboard. So there's a number of different ways that we can do this divergent thinking, but the concept is about getting as many ideas out in different directions as possible. Once we've exhausted the randomness of the ideas, then we want to get into the analysis. And this is where we switch from divergent thinking to convergent thinking. And this is where we become focused. So we get everybody to focus on a central point. So instead of breaking outwards from a central point, we're going to get everyone to come from outwards into the central point. This is where we start to pinpoint ideas, and we start to be critical in terms of our analysis. So we think about, okay, this is one of the key suggestions. Let's break this down. Can we work with this? What are some of the positives? What are some of the negatives? Are there elements we want to keep of this? Are there elements that we don't think will work? And you can really start to undertake a bit of an analysis, or take some critical thinking around some of the ideas that have been presented. And again, this shouldn't happen until after the divergent thinking has been stifled, because it's a very analytical part of an analytical process of thinking. And if we start doing this when we're trying to be divergent, it stifles the creativity. So you want to be creative, and then you want to say, okay, let's switch this off. Now let's be critical. And you go back and you start thinking. So you start to think more closed questions. Okay, will this one work? What is the point of this one? We can really start to really focus in on uh, um, is this a possible solution? Really start to focus in on the critical point there. Often when we're doing this divergent thinking and convergent thinking, we need to make sure that we create sufficient time and space to go through the process of analysis, consideration, and thinking, and we can work through it. So brainstorming shouldn't be a rushed activity. It should be something that we have allocated sufficient time. So that's really and I've just broken down brainstorming in terms of divergent and convergent thinking, because they're the two significant forms of thinking that we undertake when we're doing that. And of course, this random entries is just coming in it from different perspectives, different points. The other one I want to talk about is De Bono's 6 hats. So De Bono's 6 hats is the model that uses the color of these hats to represent different forms of thinking, or different ways of thinking. So the white hat is analytical. It's data driven, I should say. It focuses on facts and data. So if we've got a problem, okay, we've had this feedback from our end users. They're not happy with this. What's the statistics around that? Let's have a look at the data around user interaction. How much time have they spent with it? How many error messages have come up? How many complaints? What are the content of those complaints, and so forth? We look at the facts and figures. I'm going to skip the blue for now. I'll go to the green. The green hat really looks at creative solutions. Okay, what's something we haven't tried? What's something new? What's something from left field that we can address this one through? The black hat is the risk hat. It's the devil's advocate. What are some of the things that can go wrong? What are some of the problems with this idea? What are some of the potential pitfalls? The red hat takes into consideration people's emotions. So it looks at feelings. How are people going to feel about this? Is this going to upset anybody? Are people going to be happy with this? And then the yellow hat looks at benefits. What's the positives out of this? What do we think are the things that can be good to promote from this? So the final hat, so there are 5 hats I've looked at. The final hat's the blue hat, and that's very much the process hat. So It's the way that we do this. So often the blue hat is the manager's hat or the facilitator's hat. So the white, the green, the black, the red, and the yellow are the ways, different ways of thinking. The blue hat is a way of thinking as well, but it's more about the process that we're undertaking. So, and I suppose just a pause on that to say the process is more like, you're when the lights go out and the police officer then has to become the traffic officer, and they stand in the middle and then direct the traffic. So you're going left, you're going right. And that's really the blue hat process. Now, how does this fit in? Well, one of the Bonos is a really great creative thinking technique, and it's very popular, but it's often one that's misused. What the most common way that it's misused is that within a group, people will just put on a particular hat and just hold that hat for the whole duration of the discussion. So, I'm a bit of a negative Nelly, so I'm going to put on the black hat, and every idea that comes along, I'm just going to can it. And you're a highly emotive individual, so you're putting on the red hat, and every idea that gets put out there, you're going to just talk about the emotive element out of it. That creates a lot of conflict, and it's makes it very unproductive. The the best way to use this, according to Bono and experience, is that everybody wears the same hat for a duration of time. So we're going to call a meeting to work through a particular problem, and it might be some customer feedback about an issue. And we want to be as innovative with how we deal with this. And I'm going to be leading discussion. So I'll put my blue hat on. I'm really focused on process. I'm saying, okay, guys, this is what I want to do. We want to work through this. I'm just going to share with you what the problem is. I'm going to share with you what the lead up to it is, so the whole context, what information we have available so far, and then we're going to work through it as a group. What I want to do is I'm going to use the Bono 6 hats, and if you don't know what it is, I'll explain it to the group, but I'm assuming we've used it before. So I'm going to use the Bono 6 hats. We're going to do the white hat first. Then we're going to look at we're going to wear the green hat. We're going to put on the red hat. We're going to put on the yellow hat, and then we'll wrap up with the black hat. So, so we're going to allocate 5 minutes for each of these. So we'll start off. Everyone focus on facts and data. What are the specific facts and data do you think that we need here, that we have available, or we need to get? Then I'm going to ask everyone to take off their white hat. We'll put on our green hat. I want everyone to come up with as many creative ideas as possible, solutions. Then we're all going to take off our green hat. We're going to put on our red hat. And we're going to think about what emotional impact this is going to have, both positive and negative. Then we're all going to take off our red hat. We're going to put on our yellow hat, and so forth and so forth. And that's the best way to use this, where you have the group working together from different perspectives rather than just create a big fight where people are constantly looking at different, the same different perspective and really getting pigeonholed in that way of thinking. And by getting the group to all think in the same way, it generates a greater depth of thinking for that particular way of that we've allocated for that time. So white hat or green hat or whatever the case may be. So that's the bonus, and that's a really terrific technique as well. The other one I want to talk about is affinity charting. Affinity charting, very similar to brainstorming, except what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and cluster ideas or relationship of ideas together. So the most common way that affinity charting is done is with post-it notes. So let's go back to that brainstorming scenario I was using earlier. We've got this problem. We're going to brainstorm it, but I also want to affinity chart it, any ideas that we have. So I'm going to give everybody 5 post-it notes, and I want everyone to come up with 5 different ideas. So I want you to write one idea on each of those post-it notes, so that you've got 5 ideas one on each separate post-it note in front of you. And then I'm going to, one by one, we're going to go up on a bit of butcher's paper or flip chart like in the diagram, or we just do it on the wall, and I want you to pop it up on the wall. If you see someone else has got a similar idea to yours, I want you to cluster it together with theirs, so stick yours next to theirs. If there isn't, start a new cluster. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to see if there are themes or relationships between these ideas. So in this case, I'm just talking about solution generating, but it might be around problem solving. Here's a problem. I want you to identify 5 issues, write down each issue on one of the post-it notes, and then the same type of thing. Again, it's the writing on the post-it notes is divergent. The clustering together is first step of the convergent, and then when we do the second step, the analysis part, we're looking at a cluster of ideas rather than each idea individually. So this is the affinity charting's a terrific technique when trying to think about both divergent and convergent thinking. The last one I want to talk about is mind mapping. Mind mapping is the idea of where we're brainstorming, but we're going to put it on paper and we're going to try and link ideas together. So it's a very visual tool. It's a brainstorm tool with different ideas, but we're going to have a connection between those ideas. So let's say that the center one where it says mind map on the diagram, let's say that's the central problem, and we're going to put in there, client complaint around time to get service ABC. And then we brainstorm it, and the first issue that comes up is staffing. So in that first idea, the lime green box will put staffing, inadequate staffing. And then we're going to break down inadequate staffing. So it might be poor rosters, not enough staff, poor training, and we can then continue to break them down. So one of those ideas that come off first idea, at inadequate staffing, one of those ideas is poor training or lack of training. Then we can break down lack of training. Why aren't we doing lack of training? Well, it might be lack of resources, or it might be we don't have adequate training tools, or we don't have adequately qualified people, and then we can continue to break that down. So we're still brainstorming, but we're looking to link ideas together to try and see where schemas are forming and where there's relationship between those ideas. The other one that was on the initial slide was provocation and challenge, and this goes through all of the tools that I've been talking about. This idea of provoking, which is to stimulate thinking, to ask the right questions to get people to think in a particular way, or to challenge some thinking, which then flows on the idea of the value and the importance of challenging conventional thinking. And this goes back to concepts I've been talking through the program about conflict, and the idea that there is constructive conflict where we challenge ideas respectfully in a way that is collaborative by nature and considerate and respectful. But we can say, I think that's a really good idea, the element ABC, but let's talk a little bit about C. I've got some other thoughts on C. What do you think about this? Now that's a challenging statement, but it's done in a respectful way, and it's done in a considerate way. And this is at the heart of any form of group ideas or group thinking around consultation or idea generating or collaboration or innovative thinking. This idea that we need to be challenging the way that we think, but we don't want to challenge it in a way that's destructive to our workplace. And again, we want it somewhere that is psychologically safe. So it's got to be respectful, it's got to be considerate, but it's also got to be a way that holds us and our ideas accountable. So really, making sure that if we have something to contribute that we feel is better, is to make sure that we're doing that in a way that's assertive, that we recognize and take into consideration other people's perspectives, and we really listen to those and we acknowledge the key message, but then we make ourselves clear as well. And that's the crux of assertive communication. Okay, so there's some really good creative thinking tools, some of the most common used staples. Trust is a critical element. If there's trust missing at any of these points, it's going to have a detrimental effect on the team's ability to be innovative. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is learning development, rewards, and the workplace environment itself. So let's kick off by talking about L&D. A big part of innovation, of course, is competency. I said that we we want to encourage experimentation, but we want to be intolerant to incompetence. That doesn't mean that we yell at people if we feel they're incompetent, but it means that as a manager and as a team, that we do everything that we can to try and stamp out where people feel that they're not suitably qualified to do the task. That means training development, making sure that we're always encouraging people to look for opportunities in which they can develop a skill that they require right now or a skill that they feel they need for the future. So things like formal or informal training courses such as this, or going off the work site for a seminar or a workshop or a conference, or informal training such as on the job coaching, shadowing, buddy systems. All those are really good ways of skill development. Coaching and mentoring, coaching where we're working closely with someone to learn a skill. So I may not be too competent in this, but you're really competent. So, you're going to be my coach. You're going to give me direction on how to do this. Or mentoring, which is more advisory. So, I can play a more advisory role for someone who may have the skills but not the confidence, and they just want to have someone they can bounce ideas and get advice off. There's also lots of learning development opportunities through online or software, self paced programs, and of course, when I talk about online, you've got the traditional online courses, but you've also got a number of instructional videos out there, and so forth. So making sure that we pick the right learning development opportunity to suit the individual, and tied in with all this is a rewards system, rewarding people when they do the right thing. Because as we've talked about through other units, rewarding behavior increases the likelihood of that behavior being replicated or done again. So, if someone comes up with a great idea or comes up with an idea that has stimulated more collaboration to come up with better ideas, then we want to reward that, and it can be through formal, tangible rewards such as gifts, certificates, bonuses in some case, or pay increases or promotions. These are all tangibles, but most commonly through intangibles or the more non-physical stuff, such as appreciation, acknowledgement. So saying thank you to someone, or just sharing it with the team, and taking a moment to genuinely appreciate someone's contribution to that. It's sometimes even just a morning tea or a get together as a team to celebrate something can be really good. Sending out an email to the team to thank them, or some form of newsletter. Those are all examples of informal, low cost rewards that can be really, really effective. Just to sort of, someone's put in the hard work and they've got recognition amongst their peers, it can be really quite rewarding. And just sort of formally touch off on a couple of things we've been talking about in terms of the actual environment itself. Making sure that the environment for innovation, the physical environment, is conducive to creative and innovative thinking. So, making sure that the space, sometimes just having the right level of light, in some cases, the right color combination, that can be really important. Right levels of oxygen, that encourage people to be active rather than to get people in the doldrums, or make them feel deflated and flat. So the physical environment with light, space, air, those things can be really important too, but also making sure logistically. So if you're asking for collaboration, having an environment where people can connect, whether it's physically, if it's in the workplace, having meeting rooms, or, sometimes people like open plans. That can be really important. If it's not physical, it's about having the right software in place so people can connect, whether it's through instant messaging or Teams or Skype, or whatever the platform of your preference. And of course, things like making sure that there's an environment of trust, an environment of openness. That there is that sense of excitement and lightheartedness, even though the work is serious. that people have the freedom and autonomy within their scope to be able to make decisions and work and have the confidence to be able to do that. Those things are really important in terms of having the right innovative environment. And just in communication, just going back to those values of important relationship building, so open and honest and constructive communication and feedback. That people are there supportive in a sense of providing advice when required, motivation when required, and a sense of non-judgmental, so that we can be constructive without actually judging the individual. And those things are really important. And just in terms of process, making sure that we have the right processes in place, the right processes in place to raise ideas and suggestions, the right processes in place to get collaboration from others, the right processes in place for managing risks and creating time, um, and for constructive debate, such as the critical thinking tools that we talked about earlier, the right processes in place for professional development, and the right processes and tools as well. So making sure that people have, whether it's the time or the money or the equipment required to be innovative. Sometimes that can be about having the space, having the technology. It can be about having simple things like whiteboards and so forth, or the documents in which to raise and work through an idea. Okay, so that takes us to the end of the topic. So in summary, we looked at innovation and why it's important. We looked at different theories of innovation and just brought that back to the context of working within an innovative space. We looked at innovative cultures. What are they? How do we build those? What are the type of things that create an innovative culture? We looked at 3M as an example of an innovative culture, both from a management, here's our values and here's why it's important, but also a pragmatic, here's one process that we have in place that drives innovation. Uh, we talked about making sure that we align our innovative goals with our organizational goals, so that our goals um, and our plans align with our innovative culture and aspirations. And as part of that, we looked at risk management. We talked about encouraging innovation through consultation and ideas, and why that's important and how we do that. We spent a bit of time looking through some of the key critical thinking tools. Then we looked at personal behavior of us as leaders and how that drives innovation or can hinder it in some cases. And then finally, we just wrapped up talking about learning development, systems and ways that we can reward innovative behaviors, and the workplace environment, and some of the considerations around atmosphere, communication, and process around that. Hopefully, that all made sense to you and has provided you the information required to work through this unit. As usual, if you have any questions or queries, please don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, good luck with the unit. Thank you very much.